Hello, this is the second part series really of about the standards check, and also part 3. Remembering what I said, when I refer to this standards check, I'm equally referring to this part 3 test and equally really referring to audit. Part of the series about the standards check, we're now going to be looking at a general topic on the risk management. Now this general topic, it comes under several headings which I'll cover in a moment. Back in the old days, part 3 was very much about identifying risks. Really, we talked about analysis, but really a lot of instructors didn't really understand what the analysis was about. With the new introduction, the DVSA are looking at sort of helping that, and they've given you the separate subcategories to help that. So what is risk management? Wikipedia gives risk as the risk is really about the possibility of losing something of value. Well, something of value, of course, in driving could be the vehicle, your life, some injury, etc., etc. So, the risk of losing something, really. Risk management, Wikipedia gives us, is the identification, the evaluation, and the prioritization of those risks. And that's very much what the section is. If we're going to move towards safer drivers, then there's only so much people can do with vehicle technology and so much they can do with road law. But if people are not actually evaluating or understanding the risk, then you may as well not have anything at all. So it is very, really crucial in developing good and safe and competent drivers that they learn to start evaluating risk. Typically, historically, I've seen instructors who have continued to take the part of the risk right the way through the lesson, all the way through to even to the driving test, where I've seen instructors who have been guiding or pointing out risk to their learners on the route and telling them which lane to take on a driving test, etc. These pupils were still passing driving tests, but as I often said, more by accident than anything else. So we need to start getting learners to evaluate risk for themselves. When you drive a car, there are hundreds and hundreds of risks every moment, every day, all the time, and you can't cover all of them. But the object of us is to be able to start to get them to appreciate the risks and to start thinking beyond the simple, oh, I'm going to crash, or etc. It's no good with a young driver. They don't believe they're going to crash. It won't happen to me. It will never happen to me. The crashes are things that happen to other people. I spend quite a lot of time delivering speed awareness courses and also the What's Driving You course, which was about risk, which was when people would use mobile phones or jump red traffic lights, etc. And also driver alert courses where people had actually crashed, and they would never believe these things would ever happen to them, and they don't believe it. Getting them to think about the risk is more about but what if it did? What if it did? What would be the consequences? And sometimes you can get them on there. Let's take our young learner. Our young learner has just freshly passed their test. Where are they going to at the weekend? Well, I suspect they're possibly going to pop out to the local beach, Newquay, Blackpool, or wherever, Brighton. Have they really considered the risks in that car? Have they considered the additional weight of 5 people in the back of a Corsa? Apparently, according to accident reports, you can get 5 in the back of a Corsa. Even with 3 in the back of the Corsa, etc. What about the risks there? And who would those 3 be? Possibly young friends of theirs, possibly ones who are going to edge them on. Go on, you can go faster than this. My dad, blah, blah, blah. Possibly it's the boyfriend or the girlfriend in the front seat. That causes other problems as well. They want to be seen as cool, as in control, and things like that. A whole mixed bag of emotions which they need to be thinking about. And we as driving instructors can start to get them to think about that in their lessons. Now with lessons, it starts off with the early risks really of things like when moving off and stopping. We tell a pupil to check their blind spots. Well, why? Well, because there might be a car coming. So what? The phrase you'll often hear me say, so what? Does it matter? You know, they'll stop for you, won't they? You've got your signal on. If they hit you, it's their fault, isn't it? Well, apparently called to mum and dad, yes it is, because if somebody hits you from the rear, it's their fault. Okay, well maybe we can sue them from our wheelchair. But we don't want that really. It's what is the risk? You know, they're coming from the rear. What might they do? Maybe they've not seen you. Maybe they're on the mobile phone. And yes, I know they shouldn't be, but it's still you need to protect yourself and the occupants of your car. And in a sense, you need to take control. What is the risk? Looking behind, is it things that are obscuring the view? Things like this. You don't need to get your learner to do everything. A popular misconception I see amongst the forums is when somebody will give check test advice and say, you've got to mention the dual controls. You have to. I did my test and I failed because I didn't mention the dual controls. Well, I obviously wasn't sitting there, but I would imagine the examiner's word was something along the road of, you could have mentioned the dual controls. Where risk wasn't talked about, where, you know, risk wasn't mentioned, you know, the instructor didn't mention things, and the examiners used examples. You could have mentioned the car behind. You could have mentioned the pedestrian crossing. You could have mentioned the traffic light. He doesn't mean say you must have necessarily, unless of course it was a critical risk situation. But he's saying that these are examples. Use some things. Recently, doing some training with a guy, you know, the pupil was stopping abruptly at test standard, or virtually test standard, was stopping abruptly behind vehicles, and basically the vehicle, you know, the pupil was clearly not looking far enough the road ahead and was not thinking of risk, etc. The guy was a little confused because the examiner was saying, well, you know, you could have mentioned this and you could have mentioned this and you could have mentioned this, thinking, of course, that the examiner was telling him that he should have mentioned all these things. And he was thinking, but, you know, we weren't doing a lesson on that. Well, no, but that is what that learner needed. That learner, yes, in a couple of weeks' time was coming up for a test, but that learner was reacting late to things because they weren't assessing risk. They weren't basically looking at the road ahead, looking far enough to think about these things. So we needed to pick this learner up from here, move them back here, pop them into a lesson where we looking at the road ahead, thinking about risk. And whilst they were doing that, we could have popped them back here straight between the test again, just before the test. And I'm sure it would have been a successful outcome. So risk evaluation. And it's not just using superficial stuff. What is the risk? Where's the risk coming from? What is there? Looking around. Is the learner really aware of the surroundings? One of the things on the sheet it says here, you know, was the learner aware, or was the trainer aware of the pupil's surroundings, etc., etc. So, you know, the learner may be looking all around, but are they seeing? Many times in role play as a trainer, I would actually move my head physically round, but keep my eyes closed. I was trying to, when I was aware that the trainee was not really evaluating where I was looking, and they were just happy to see my head move, and therefore they were saying, oh yeah, I saw you look round. But they didn't realise that although I was looking, I was not seeing. That's overcome simply by asking some questions, you know. So I look round, yeah, the trainer has a quick look round, and the trainer might say things, what do you think about the white vehicle up ahead? Or what, are there any additional risks in this area? You know, what about that road to the right with the steep hill? Could that be a problem? Again, these are just suggestions on things to have talked about. And every given scenario, every given situation would be different. But these are the sort of things you can start saying, you know, have you considered that hill, or have you considered that? Have you considered it's 4 o'clock and maybe there are pupils around? You know, maybe there are school pupils around. We don't have to deal with every single one, and examiners and things and trainers may suggest some, but they're just using examples. You know, you might come up with, or you, when you're talking to a learner, your learner might go, oh, well, there are school kids around, etc., etc. And I've noticed there are people coming from the supermarket over there. Great. That pupil is thinking of the risks, and then we can talk about the consequences, and of course, obviously, what they might do to it. But that's for another day. So in terms, it's just making sure that the pupil is aware of the risks, and how we do that is by asking them questions, because very much instructors are not aware that the learner is not really looking, etc., or they're physically looking but not seeing. So already covered that one there. Now, did the trainer fully understood how the responsibility risk could be shared? Because this is basically when you first get in the car with a brand new learner, with a learner who's never driven before, 100% really. Well, I'd say 90% of the risk is yours, and you give 10% of the responsibility to the learner. By the time you end, now, although we tend to say I want the trainer or the learner to have 100% of the risk, I'm possibly still keeping a little bit back until they've actually proved themselves, etc. I wouldn't say, well, 100% of it is yours, because that's basically saying I'm out of a job. Although it's what we're aiming for, really. We're trying to get them 100% responsible for the risk. Were directions and instructions given to the pupil in good time? Often driving instructors generate risk by leaving instructions a bit too late, or making their wordings confused, or talking to their pupils right on a junction when the pupils really should be doing other things. We've talked about the surroundings, etc., of the pupils' actions. Was any verbal or physical intervention given? Again, the first dual control we have in the car is our voice. As soon as we're aware of something happening, we leave it enough time, and it's a difficult one here. Do you jump in too soon? But after a suitable time, you think this learner's not reacting to this. We need to be reacting with words rather than reacting with joules, etc., etc. Most of the times, joules are used because neither the pupil nor the instructor were planning ahead. Neither were thinking what is going on. There is a reason why a driving instructor has to have a better eyesight than the learner. We should be looking that much further ahead, and we should be planning there. And giving sufficient feedback to help the pupil understand. Comprehensive feedback. We're going to look at that. This is just the introduction to risk management. I'm now going to conclude. I'm going to go on now and with separate things about the individual things. These are the little bites where you can have a few minutes checking with yourself, and perhaps during a tea break, lunch break, or something, wherever. Okay, thank you very much. Bye for now. Happy teaching.